Hi guys, this is Braden.
Hi, this is Halie, and today we're going to be talking about our strategy demonstration, which is talking about questioning circles. A questioning circle is used to generate questions that merge textual and critical reading and then relate those to personal connections. A questioning circle is important because the questions produced have the ability to generate thoughtful and interesting conversation about a text that can bring about new ideas, thoughts, and feelings about that same text.
So when it comes to questioning circles, there are three main areas of focus in that circle, and those would be, and I have them illustrated here, are text, world, and reader. And then there's three overlapping areas right after that, which kind of encompass the three like that they're in, or the two that they're in between, and those are like they kind of cross over and overlap, and they're supposed to kind of there are additional questions, but they're supposed to cover those content areas that would cover just the just simple and like confined to those two areas, not all three. And then at the end, right in the middle, which I don't really have, you can't really see the area, but it's right in the middle. This is one that encompasses all three, text, reader, and world, and it's called a dense question. So we have a few learning objectives that we're going to, that should be completed by the end of this lesson. So the first one is, upon completion of this lesson, our classmates should be able to effectively generate questions relating to the main three areas of questioning circles. The second is, our classmates should be able to use generated questions to lead group discussions for the week's activities. And the third is, by the end of the lesson, our classmates should be able to incorporate questioning circles into their future classrooms to foster discussion among students. When you guys create your own questions in your groups, you should be using the text that your groups chose to talk about in week 4. I sent out a message on Friday to everyone in class that had a link to the Google Doc that we created, which has a chart on it that you'll use to foster your or to create your questions. And it's not the circles; it's more like you fill in a chart. It's just so to keep it less confusing. And that has all the instructions as well as your group's names and the text that you guys chose then.
Also, for your questions, you guys will want to remember that your question should require answers that stem directly from the main focus it is inquiring about. So if you have a question about the text, the answer needs to come specifically from the text. If you have a question that relates to the reader, you need to have a question that can require a personal connection from the reader. And then if you have a question about the world, you need to make sure that the answer is coming directly from, connections to the world.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Also, you guys will want to make sure you do not ask questions that require too personal of information or that causes trauma for the students. You'll get into like legality issues if you ask questions that require too personal of an answer.
Okay. Before we start diving into our questions, we chose for our examples to use Harry Potter as the text of choice. We chose this text because we felt that we both had enough knowledge over the text to be able to answer questions that relate to the three areas of focus. So we use questions to show that we've read the text and can pull information from it. We can connect what we've read to our personal experiences, and we have the ability to connect with examples from the real world. So now we're going to kind of do a mock question, like teacher-student questioning circle, to give some examples of what questioning circle questions should look like, and we'll kind of do an explanation and we'll do Haley's going to be asking, and I'm going to be answering the questions. So, all right, here we go.
Okay, so to begin, I'm going to do a disclaimer before each question. So my first question is a text question, so Braden's answer should come directly from the text. So I would ask him, what is the explanation the Dursleys give for their mistreatment towards Harry?
So from the text directly, Harry's aunt and uncle attempt to put Harry down because he's abnormal, and they try not to stray from normalcy at all. They try to live quiet and respectable lives, and they scoff at anything out of the ordinary. So Harry, being a wizard, really goes against all their livelihood, and it causes them to subdue him and push him to the background to maintain like an air of order.
Okay, our next question will be a reader question. So the answer for this question is produced specifically off of, Braden as the reader and how he thinks. So I would ask, have you ever been judged for what you believe in, and how did you respond?
So, in my own personal experience, I have a father whose opinions are very different from mine in pretty much every area of life. And I was always like, it was never really anything really bad other than we just didn't get along very much. And it kind of made me feel bad that I didn't ever really feel very close to my dad because of these things.
Okay. Our next question is a world question. So Braden's task is going to be pulling information from the world to answer the question. Or you can also choose, information from other texts you read or other literature. So these two things kind of go hand in hand, world and other literature or other texts. So what are the restrictions of being born into a family whose beliefs do not match your own?
Yeah, so things that I've seen in other movies and texts is you often see characters who they don't really get along with their family, and they don't really they are bullied sometimes by their siblings or by their parents. And so it starts getting into those relationships that are strained. And so the character in question kind of feels like an outsider. So they hang out with their friends more. They really don't have much of a family life. And so, and that just, it kind of makes me think of other texts that I've read. I can't really think of any in particular, but that's really some of the examples. You can find a lot of those. So now that we've finished the first 3 areas of focus, if you guys want to pause the video for like 5 to 6 minutes and try to come up with each of your, like 3 questions each, like one for each area of focus for the text that you guys are going to be working on with your group. Now's the time that you would do that.
Okay, so next we are going to be talking about those 3 main focuses and then connecting them to one another. So we have the areas of the text and the reader, the text and the world, and then the world and the reader. So for our text and reader question, Braden is going to be specifically answering based on the text and himself. So he has to choose an answer that would, that would have both his opinion or something that happened personally to him and something that he would pull from the text. So the question is, out of any of the characters in Harry Potter, who do you most relate to and why?
So I've read Harry Potter quite a few times, and something that I've always noticed as a theme is that Harry would do anything. He would risk his own life and he would risk his own safety just to help his friends. Something that I think about is in the 4th book, he goes and he tries to save both Ron and Flora's sister in the bottom of the lake when they're doing the challenges. And I think that that's something that I can relate to. I would always do anything to help my friends. I would give my life to help my friends. And so I think that that's something that I, as a reader back in those days, I always related to really strongly.
Right. Okay, so the next pair is text and world or other literature. And for this one, he's going to be pulling specifically from the text and another text or information from the world. So the question says, thinking of Harry's situation, what are some examples in the media where you see people being coerced into altering their beliefs to fit the standards of someone else?
So I don't have the exact evidence for this. I just know what I've seen on social media for this example. So in Harry Potter, we see Harry's he's really, no one knows about him other than his family. Like none of their friends or none of the people that his uncle works with or none of his cousin's friends even know that Harry exists. And they try to push him into the background because he's different than they are. Something that this makes me think of, but doesn't exactly relate to it directly, is something that we've seen in the social media with Britney Spears. I don't know if you guys who are watching have heard the example that was on Instagram where Britney Spears she's been kind of basically on house arrest by her dad or her manager because she's not allowed to handle her own affairs because of her problems in the past. And so there was this big scandal where one of the comments on her Instagram video told her to wear yellow in her next video and to signal if she was in distress or like in trouble or something like that. In her next video, she wore yellow and it was like a whole big thing that blew up. And so if that is true and if that's how that is, then that's definitely an example that could be used here, because if she's being pushed to the background, she's basically being kept under, like, she's not being like enslaved like Harry was, but she's not able to live her own life and be her own person, which is exactly relating to what Harry's been subjected to.
All right. So next would be a connection of world and reader. So this is the last one that connects the two before your dense question. So the answer would pull directly from personal experience and from the world. So our question is, state your opinion on examples you've witnessed where someone was judged for having different beliefs or opinions than the majority.
I think that right now in particular, we're seeing like a lot of examples with that, with all of these political things going on. I won't get into like the exact, all the politics that have to do with it, but you see a lot of these examples where in my own experience, I've talked about, well, actually, no. I'm not gonna talk about my own experience, but we'll talk about other experiences. I have a friend, for example, who was kind of subjected to the same things that I was because we have different opinions than our families. And we connected because of something like that. And I think that it's obviously really bad when other people can't really accept what your views are. So like, I don't want to, I can't think of the specifics of it, but like the politics are really just, they don't align with it, and these beliefs don't align, and that kind of causes us to become friends. And I don't agree with that, because I think that our families should be more willing to accept their opinions, because we have accepted their opinions that we don't agree with for years. And so like this whole separation just is a driving factor between the two of us, and it's really affected a lot of relationships. So I think that when these kind of examples come to light, it's never a good thing. There's never really very many positive aspects of what happens. And so now that we finished those next three, you guys should pause the video and work on these three areas of focus for 5 to 6 minutes relating to your own text that you guys have chosen.
And remember, when you go questions, that you need to think about questions that will generate answers that stem directly from the three main focuses, which are text, reader, and world. And remember, when you pair the two questions, that you don't think too broadly, because then you'll get into the legalities and asking too personal of information. So lastly, we have our dense question, our 7th question, and it asks, people often rally for things that they support, such as how characters in Harry Potter rallied behind Muggle rights. If you were able, what kind of rally would you organize and why? And remember, this question is pulling information from all three main focuses.
So this question is like a little bit of a sillier one, obviously. So in Harry Potter, you do see them, they kind of rally behind Muggles and wizards who, there's split into factions of wizards who support Muggles' rights, and then wizards who think that wizards should be kind of top tier, over, like have more rights than Muggles should. So mine is a little bit sillier than that, but I would have a rally for National Grilled Cheese Day, just because it just seems more lighthearted and something that obviously I love food, and who doesn't love food? And National grilled cheese is definitely one of my favorite foods, so I would support it through anything. Definitely love grilled cheese. I would eat it every day if I could. And so now I think for the dense question, it's better to pause for a little bit longer, because these are hard questions to come up with. This takes a lot more time than you would think to kind of equally encompass all three areas of focus. So pause it for maybe like 10 minutes or until you think that you've got a good enough question that really relates to every area.
And remember that your text is something that you guys have all read. So this may be, obviously easier with your group, but if you are doing the questions by yourself, you guys have full range to go through your questions together and decide, which one is the best to put into the Google Doc to show us, that you have understood what we just taught to you, and that you can create these questions for your own classrooms and for your students, and be able to, foster these discussions that entail the critical thinking, the critical reading, and merging textual evidence and personal connections or worldly connections to the text that you guys have.
Oh, something I want to say really quickly is that our demonstration is slightly different than the ones that have become before, because like Whitney's and Olivia's demonstrations, all of theirs have been more teaching to a class, like a hypothetical class. Ours is kind of like that in the sense that we're having this mock discussion, but for the most part, this is more or less teaching you guys how to come up with these questions, not so much of to how to use these questions exactly. No, this is showing how to use them, but it's less about that. We're not teaching a hypothetical class in the same way that you guys have in your discussion so far. So keep that in mind.
Right. And we're really trying to get you guys to understand that the questions, the most important aspect of the questions is to get your students to answer exactly what you're asking. So it has to come exactly from one of those main focuses, or, a combination of the two, and to really get them to think about the text with the dense question, because the dense question has to take all parts, and it's a tough question to come up with.
So now, so something that we talked about is how students become, this whole idea of students having to become better citizens. Is that the part where okay, the whole idea of students having to become better citizens has a lot to do with stepping into the role of the authorial audience, which is, if you guys don't remember, the definition is the intended audience that the author wrote the text for. So that way, you want your students to step into that role, so that way they're better able to understand to whom and why they originally wrote it. And something that I didn't really mention before, but needs a lot of, I think that something should be said about, is that our demonstration was a little bit different in the sense that it was more between just the teacher and the student, because obviously there's only two of us. But in your own classrooms, these kind of questions should foster other answers from other students. So I think that it's important that the teachers don't have a ton of involvement in these discussions. I think that obviously they should lead it in the right way, and they should play official sometimes, kind of leading the discussion in the right direction, but the students should lead it. They should be able to answer these questions and come up with different opinions of their own and different things that relate to the text. But like Halie was saying, they should relate to these areas of focus specifically and not try and jump around or cross over where they shouldn't.
Right. And also, your students should be able to make these questions after you've shown them how, and they should be able to do this with any text that they've read. And it sparks interest in your classroom because they're able to talk about themselves. They're able to have something to look forward to. If you ask these questions, maybe if you were to create these questions prior to finishing a book, and then you have your students finish a book and your questioning circle questions, really dive deep into the text as a whole, then your students have something to look forward to and to have interest in. The reason questioning circles are efficient is that they foster discussion that make our students become invested in what they've read and how it relates to other aspects of their lives. Oftentimes, these discussions are meant to replicate dining room table chats, which is something that Wilhelm mentioned, or that is mentioned in Wilhelm's book. And these dining room table chats have the ability to and have often helped our students become better citizens.
Something important that has to do with them becoming better citizens is teaching them that their answers should be backed up by they don't have to be backed up by a basis of fact, but should have some kind of evidence related to it. So when it comes to reader, it should have some kind of basis on the text, like what they've actually read, and it should relate to that directly. Reader, it should have to, did I say reader? I think I said reader first on accident. I meant the text. It should have to do exactly with the text. Then when it comes to the reader, their answers should have to do with their personal experience or what they've kind of experienced in their own lives. And world, it should relate to either other texts, what they've seen in society, media, things like that. So, and then obviously the crossover questions should encompass just answers that are directly related to those two. The two that they kind of go with.
Right. And you remember that you don't want your students to get too personal, but you want them to be able to add a personal touch to the questions that you're asking. Me and Braden kind of struggled with that first. So make sure when you're asking your questions, all your questions don't have to be about the same thing. They can talk about the text as a whole, a series of texts. You guys are talking about Romeo and Juliet and the yellow wallpaper. So those are singulars. But if, our conversation entailed multiple books, so we kind of asked questions that ranged over the text as a whole. He could have chose any character that he related to, or he could have connected it to any aspect of the world or other literature. So just make sure that you have a lot of you know, a lot of different ways for them to answer the questions.
So I think that's all we have. Do you agree with that? Okay, so hopefully this is something that you guys choose to use in your future classrooms, because like we said, it's a really effective way for these students to connect the 3 areas of focus, and because of it, they generate a much deeper understanding with their text and kind of can relate to it in more ways than just classroom work.
Right. And we hope that this strategy was effective and efficient for you to be able to do the assignment that we've had. And we will also be leaving feedback on your group videos. So we will evaluate how you did with your questioning circle questions. And, you know, if there's anything that we see that may not hit exactly what we think should be, you know, a part of your questioning circle, then we'll let you know. So don't worry too much about it, but also, you know, put good effort into your questions.
Right. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.